"It takes a while to really grab you" is a phrase we heard and said a lot in 2019 around video games. Many times in 2019, I'd jump into a game after reading a glowing review, only to find myself 2 hours in and wondering what on earth all the fuss was about because said game didn't grab me at all. And by said game, I mean Death Stranding, and Outer Wilds, and Fire Emblem Three Houses, and Control, and Jedi Fallen Order, and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and Disco Elysium, because man did great video games really make us work for it last year. Thankfully, all that work paid off in spades in so many instances across a range of genres. So here's a snapshot of the most unusual and perplexing games from that list that we had to learn to love from last year. Though Death Stranding was buoyed up by the reputation of Hideo Kojima, it wasn't long after we got our first proper look at the game that the phrases walking simulator and FedEx simulator were getting thrown around online, and not in a good way. Like many games from last year though, Death Stranding seriously grows on you. Underneath the melodramatic exposition dump that makes up much of the main story, and the gameplay that's riddled with shifting to the right and left constantly so you don't fall down and make digital Norman Reedus embarrass himself, there's so much heart and serenity to be found if you dig a little deeper. It takes at least a dozen hours to collect the tools that speed up your long, arduous journeys between delivery points, and even more for the game to kick into the more action-packed episodes. But there's beauty in the slow moments and joy in bringing people together and connecting, both in the story and incidentally with other players who've left helpful signs and structures behind. Death Stranding wasn't what anybody expected from Hideo Kojima's next game, but it somehow coalesced into something truly special for those patient enough to hold down R2 and L2 for the first 5 or so hours of the game. Last year, a lot of people played their first Fire Emblem game with the arrival of Three Houses, and as someone in that group, mastering the learning curve was a real investment. This is especially true if you want to see the whole story, which would take you no fewer than 4 playthroughs averaging 60 hours each, or if you're me, 140 hours for a single playthrough. Getting to that level of commitment was trying at first. The opening hours treated newcomers to deep RPG and turn-based combat systems, significant time management demands, and a cast of characters who didn't make the best first impression. I'm looking at you, Bernadetta.
Hold on, you can't just...
Fortunately, the more hours you get into the game, the more nuanced the characters get, the more interesting the story becomes, and the more affecting you'll find the overarching themes of friendship and personal growth. Mastering the gameplay elements and spending your time wisely to see the evolution of as many characters as possible is so well worth the dozens of hours required to get there. So it's no big surprise that so many people jumped in for another go around the fascinating fantasy world in New Game Plus. GameSpot's only 10 out of 10 game last year, Disco Elysium, easily joined the ranks of games we had to grow to love. If Death Stranding is a walking simulator, then Disco Elysium is a reading simulator. Genuinely, it's a whole-ass book. Allegedly, there are 1 million words to read in the game, and in the first couple of hours, when you're wading through loads of exposition and complicated lore, it can be difficult to see the light at the end of the urban dystopia tunnel. On top of that, Disco Elysium is sort of an RPG, but one where you invest points in things like rhetoric and visual calculus. It all makes sense when you get stuck in, but you do have to get stuck in for it all to make sense. The more time you spend in the world, the more you grow to appreciate its eccentricities. The writing in Disco Elysium is unparalleled. It manages to be hilarious, insightful, delightful, and heartbreaking. As a result, exploring its disheveled city replete with characters trying to do their best in challenging circumstances and helping them in any small way you can is more than worth the effort. Disco Elysium is challenging in a way that it defies genre expectations in almost every way, but that's also what makes it brilliant. Mobius Digital's whimsical Outer Wilds is the game that almost didn't make it onto this list, despite it more than qualifying, because it took me so many tries to start enjoying it. The story is muddy about its objectives and trusts you to make your own way in the world with very little guidance. It also trusts you to get the hang of its unwieldy ship, which is more of a lunar lander than a traditional video game spaceship. I've given up on Outer Wilds more times than I have fingers, but once I forget my frustrations enough to wade back in, I'm always rewarded with some kind of morsel for my trouble. The pieces you add to the puzzle of the game's story may be small and difficult to uncover, but putting together the final picture is a satisfying journey. Outer Wilds has total faith in you to adjust to its curious controls, retrace your steps, and not give up on it when your progress milestones become few and far between. It's an admirable quality that stands as a contrast to other games drenched in glowing interactables and objective markers. And once the frustration wears off and you can achieve something on your own, the satisfaction of getting one step closer to unraveling the story is unbeatable. As is the case in multiple great games from 2019, many of the things that make Outer Wilds feel impenetrable are also the things that make it feel unique and special. It and the other games I've talked about stretched beyond what was expected of their genres, systems, and narrative structure. Though it meant we endured a year of learning curves and quote-unquote getting to the good bit, it also meant we were treated with exceptional games that rewarded our patience with fascinating experiences that shone in an entirely unexpected way.